We are back. It's the Joe Holka Show presented by PrizePicks. Locks of the week, position by position. These are players that we have to have exposure to on DraftKings Week 18. We're getting the band back together a little bit. You guys know Jake Ciely. He's here every week, but you may not know that we used to do a show with another host every single week. It was the Fantasy Footballers DFS podcast way back in the day, honestly, 4 years ago. And he's with us again today. We're reunited for the first time since then. You guys know him from FTN. You know him from Sirius Radio. Chris Meany, what's going on, brother? How the hell are you?
Holka, welcome. Thank you. I can't believe 4 years. It actually feels like a lot longer than that.
It does.
I was going to say the same thing.
Together. It does feel like a hell of a lot longer than that, but appreciate the invite. It is going to be fantastic. Week 18 is always a wild week. I think actually maybe an opportunity. Maybe some people don't want to play some DFS, so maybe we can find some edges and help some people out. But it has to be really good to get back together with you guys. I see Jake all the time, but
yeah,
I'm excited to see you.
It doesn't count.
We've been teasing it, man, for a little while. So if anyone out there doesn't know Chris, make sure you guys follow him on Twitter at Chris Meany. You got it on the screen right there. And check out the hockey takes, too. We actually have a decent amount of people that like hockey in our community, Meany. So they're going to have to be checking out your props videos. We're going to be jumping into props a little bit more on the hockey side here shortly as well. But we're here to talk about some football today. And there is a lot to get into for this slate. So we're going to go position by position per usual. We will build the lineup at the end per usual, but let's start with quarterback. And Jake, you're here every week, so I'm actually going to kick this to Meany first. There's a couple guys.
You got your hat. I gotta tilt my hat. You got yours forward. His is backwards. So here, we're gonna pull like the old Dontrell Willis
Big
here.
Texans fan now.
Yeah,
there you go.
Fair enough. The Texans this week took a couple overs on them, by the way, so hopefully they can get there for us. But let's start with Meany. I mean, we do have like the Dax of the world at the top. We have a couple guys in the middle that'll be interesting. Geno, Mullins, who I'll let Jake speak to in a second. But if we're getting away from some of these chalky players at the quarterback position this week, who are you on this week, Meany? I know that Geno, that game in particular, Seahawks and Cardinals game, looks pretty good as well.
Yeah, it does look pretty good. And Kyler looked pretty good last week. I know it was a game maybe that his head coach, Jonathan Cannon, had circled his Super Bowl against his former squad. But Kyler, he looks healthy over the past couple of weeks. And I think Geno's certainly in play in that game as well. I think you're spot on. The top of the board is going to be pretty chalky when it comes to some of these quarterbacks, because there's just a lot of, it's the year of the backup, and we're going to see more backup quarterbacks this weekend. But for Kyler, you know, in a potential high-scoring game here against Seattle, we know that they need to win here, but I think he's running around a little bit more than he did earlier. There was a stretch there, week 12, week 13, where he only had 22 rushing yards, but over the past couple of weeks, 24, 32, and 49. He's racked up about 15 rushing attempts over that span as well. Not a lot of weapons, of course, we know, but he does have 5 passing touchdowns. So it feels like the ceiling is kind of limited with Kyler because of the lack of weapons, but he's hooked up with Dortch. Michael Wilson's a guy. Last week, we saw a 2-point conversion and a touchdown. There was a bit of a mishap between the two guys, and Kyler looked pretty frustrated with Wilson on the sidelines in that game, but then he went back to him a couple times. So I like Kyler at this price. I think he's got a decent floor. Like I said, we're used to seeing him kind of average 22, 23 DraftKings points. He's just averaging the 19 so far, but both quarterbacks in that game, and Geno, as you mentioned, a little bit cheaper. It's 6,100, definitely in a much better spot. I know that Geno played pretty good last week. You know, people in Seattle are really hard on him, but the offensive line didn't do him any favors. He's got DK there. JSN is trending up at the right time. So those two quarterbacks in this game environment, we know that Arizona, they're just going to play all their guys, and Seattle needs to win. And that's something that I want to look at in this week. Holka is just focusing on quarterbacks that I know are going to play the entire game, and teams that I know are going to play all their players and try to get a W.
Yeah, I kind of buried the lead a little bit. Week 18 is so much different than other weeks just because we have so much in play from a motivation perspective that we're going to have to work through. Actually, it's a little bit less muddy than it normally is. The NFL has done a pretty good job at scheduling some of these games a little bit earlier, so they'll have to actually be going full bore, not knowing what's going to happen in the afternoon. So there's a little bit less to sift through from that perspective. But yeah, absolutely, Seattle is one of those teams that's going to be playing hard. And these Cardinals, even though they've been eliminated, they still have been putting up a fight on the other side. So I think that game is really interesting. We broke it down from a stacking perspective with Rich Rebar early in the week. So check out that video if you want a little bit more on that game. But let's talk a little bit about the top, Jake, at quarterback. So Dak, Fields, both of these guys in spots where they're looking pretty appealing from a DFS perspective, I think, this week.
Yeah, they are. And to touch real quickly on that, there's like three things that I want to look at here. Is Meany brought up one of them is fighting for a playoffs, that's why I have Geno as well, especially the Arizona Cardinals, third most passing touchdowns. And if you look at pretty much any decent quarterback has done great against them this year. So great matchup there. But that's the thing. It's like, so playoffs, second thing would be full eliminated teams, because full eliminated teams most of the time just play everything like normal. And a lot of times you'll get the full eliminated teams against teams that might be resting people. And then the third, which there's a couple articles out there, so kudos to the people who did it. And I was originally thought of doing the same thing, but so many people already did it, so go find them. Is looking for the bonuses. Remember Mike Evans and Tom Brady a few years ago? Look for the players that are potentially have bonuses to hit in week 18, because they're about helping each other, especially if it's a quarterback wide receiver tandem. So look for those kind of things. With Dak, hey, you got the fact that you got the division on the line. They have to win. They have to face, guess what? The best passing defense for quarterbacks that we could find as in a positive. I mean, you go over to APA, which I have over the Athletic, like 7.6 ahead of the average. So they, on average, if an average quarterback faces them, they'll probably give about 25, 26 points to that quarterback. And it's Dak Prescott with a playoff scenario on the line that they could win the division. So if you don't want to go all the way up to Dak at 8,000, the second highest option, I would probably, there's only two really in the high end options that I really like. Dak's one of them, and Justin Fields is the other. We've talked Justin Fields for weeks now. The rushing upside is there. Chicago against Green Bay. Green Bay has nobody left. They're starting rookies at both corner positions. Even if Christian Watson doesn't return, Jaden Reed already practiced. So if you having Jaden Reed out there, Tucker Kraft, I mean, he's got his weapons, and they have a chance to back into the playoffs as well with a win here. So I know people are worried that the Bears can shut them down, but I think this might be a little bit higher scoring than people expect. So I'm in for Fields as much as I always am. The rushing bonus he hit just 2 weeks ago. So I'm always looking for that potential too.
Yeah, we'll talk a little bit about quarterback as we progress here. Mullins at 5,100 is at least interesting as well.
That would be my one pay down. Is like he's back at quarterback. This could go as sideways as possible, but it is Detroit. And here's the thing: Minnesota can do what they want to do this week with Mullins at quarterback. He has Jefferson again, but Detroit they haven't said anything yet. I still don't believe that even if they play the entire game, that being the starters for the Lions. There's nothing at stake here, and why risk it? And their defense is already like almost as bad as the Commanders. And if they sit anybody on defense, like Hutchinson's been banged up, you take that away, that's a significant piece right there. It's like taking away Max Crosby or Aaron Donald or Dexter Lawrence. Like, so you take that away. And the concern of Mullins, he could just sit back and pick apart that defense. So that would be my one pay down. I love the Geno one, but for 1,000, even less, I think Mullins is in play again. Although, again, we saw last week and the week before that quarterback scenario could go right down the toilet very quickly.
Right. Exactly. Go ahead.
I was just going to jump in and say that I like the Mullins call. We're talking tournament plays and some upside plays here. I'd never play him in cash. Just so worried that he could take a seat. We've just seen it from Kevin O'Connell over the past couple of weeks. Like, all right, this quarterback is not doing anything, so I'm going to go back to this quarterback. I mean, there was one of my fantasy matchups. Somebody actually started Hall, and he had negative points, and I told him, I was like, man, this guy's not going to touch the field in the second half.
Yeah.
And he didn't. But I mean, if Mullins can take advantage of a weak secondary, I love it. No concerns about Dak splits, home and away splits. It's just whatever. It's Washington. You know, the pass defense is awful. It's the best possible spot. But Dak, I mean, like he played 8 games at home, 8 games on the road. The completion percentage at home is like 73. It's like 63 on the road. It's 700 fewer passing yards on the road. But I get it. It is Washington. It's a must-win situation. But these guys were in the exact same spot last year at this time of the year in Washington. It was Sam Howell, Jake's boy, his first start. And Cowboys got smoked. I mean, they scored 6 points. So
to be fair, like all those interceptions were basically in the one. It was at San Francisco. So you got to throw that at. He's played at Buffalo. Yeah, at Buffalo, at Miami, and at Carolina, who we continually talk. Joe and I have talked about this for weeks, and Chris and I have talked about it for weeks on All in Football. The Carolina pass defense is good. So you're not wrong about that, but I think this is kind of like not as bad as Jared Goff, and also part of was the teams they just happened to grab on the road, especially the 49ers. I mean, you pull out the 49ers game, and you lose half those worrisome stats.
I get it. Just wanted to bring it up. Holka, what do you think about Hurts at the top of the board? Too risky? Like, Could he play the entire game? Are they scoreboard watching at half and they see the Cowboys maybe potentially up by a couple scores, and then all of a sudden Hurts comes out of the game and limits his upside?
Yeah, it feels a little bit risky to me, especially with Dak right there. And then we don't know what's going on with Devonta Smith and that ankle injury. So I think that like the positives is the defense is, I mean, realistically, the defense might be bottom 5 in the league right now, the way they're playing. Obviously, I think they will be scoreboard watching a little bit. So Hurts is the one that makes me a little bit squeamish of this group. But honestly, like I get the Mullen stuff. I've been watching him very closely, obviously live this year. Man, this guy is absolutely terrible. So like I'm just like watching. I wish I could shout him out because I saw a short form video that just made me die the other day. They were talking about who put Josh Allen's brain into a quarterback three's body. Like just like this guy doesn't give a shit, and he's just launching it deep. All of these things. Like I know that JJ got there against this team not long ago, 2 weeks ago, which was great. We had the prop, the upside or the touchdown prop for him, which was awesome as well. But we can actually, let's transition into wide receiver next, because that's I think a little bit more relevant to what we're talking about now. Quickly though, mentioned it before, the way too early prop drop always will show you guys the wins, but also the losses. Was not a great week for the way too early prop drop. Last week we went 1-3. Thankfully, the anytime touchdown videos have been absolutely crushing, 12-3 so far this year, 80% hit rate, which is completely insane. And that includes McCaffrey getting hurt last week, but what's kind of interesting, we mentioned the Jefferson touchdown against the Lions. We did have that a couple weeks ago. CeeDee Lamb, 3 weeks in a row we've had on the video, 3 weeks in a row he has scored a touchdown for us, which is great. And then we'll get to Evans in a second, but that was one of the ones that I thought really stood out at the wide receiver position from a props perspective. 67.5 receiving yards. We got a couple props from both of you guys here shortly as well, but CD has just been our guy over the last 3 weeks or so in another amazing spot. So is there anything that you have to add to CD, Jake, as we talk through wide receiver?
No, if you can afford them.
Yeah,
End of story. Like, good luck. I know, and especially if you're going to put Dak in there with him. That's the tough thing here, which is probably going to shy enough people away, which is why I think he's not only interesting for a basically cash lock is that, but if you're going for a tournament, I think you're going to immediately differentiate yourself, because there will be smart enough people to do it and find a way around it. But I think for the most part, you're going to get hamstrung and people are going to shy away from me. Like, they're going to plug them in and immediately see what you can't get and then move away from. So 9,300. I do have one other kind of pay up play, and it goes back to the Geno play, which Meany already brought his name up when he was talking about Geno too, and that's DK Metcalf. In this situation, this is kind of the opportunity, the games that he takes advantage of. DK Metcalf at 65.5 for the prop. I kind of like the over on that. That one's a little bit of aggressive. I actually have another one I'm saving that's down at 40.5. But I think that if you're looking for the DK Geno stack, that's interesting. It's funny that you bring up Nick Mullins, because go back to it, you can go Nick Mullins, Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, super easy. I know people don't like Jordan Addison, a little bit banged up as of late. But another thing you and I have talked about for weeks, and I continually put it in my column over The Athletic, his touchdown rate is 3 times as high when Justin Jefferson is in the lineup, because it opens things up for him. So I have no problem hitting that triple stack. And you just talked about the risk of it, but 2 games in a row, Nick Mullins 22 and 24 points over on DraftKings, and you get that hit. So those are the interesting ones. And then I already brought up his name, is Jaden Reed. I'm going to live and die by this guy this year, and I'm probably going to go back to him next year in 2024. Love some Jaden Reed. I think he could be the number 1 next year, but at 5,700, the fact that he's healthy in this situation, I know Chicago's defense has been worrisome, but Jaden Reed is the one that can kind of exploit them if you look at the style that he has out there. So with their playoff life on the line, the Jaden Reed would be the only Packers receiver, and he's like one of my favorite in the 5K range.
Love it. Meany, it seems like there's a couple other guys you're paying up for. We talked about, I guess quickly, Justin Jefferson, but then it seems like you're on these Philly guys a little bit more than Jake and I, so let's talk through that as well.
Yeah, Justin Jefferson.
I convinced him on the show yesterday.
Okay.
Nick Sirianni, I still don't trust him. I feel like he may sit some guys. Like, his comments on Wednesday were just like, yeah, everyone's available to play. Well, what does that mean? Like, are they playing or not? I don't think that Devontae Smith is going to play. I know that he had the walking boot off, but I'm not sure it's really worth it for them. So I think that AJ could just be a pure volume play. And I think, what we talked about with Jalen Hurts, there's probably a lot of people that are thinking, you know what, I'm not going to spend up for AJ. The Eagles are going to check out at halftime in the second half. That's going to be it. But, there's that risk. But I think in tournaments, I'm willing to, roll the dice on that risk. Justin Jefferson, because of what you said earlier, Holka, with Mullins, he doesn't care, man.
Mhm.
He's just chucking it nonstop. And Detroit's secondary's they've had some issues. Like there's a lot of teams in the NFC, along with Philadelphia and Detroit, one of them, where the defense I'm just not completely buying in. Like they can stop the run, but you saw all the explosive plays that he gave up. I know a lot of it was Ciely on that Saturday game, but this is a really good spot as well. For them overall. Detroit, 20 touchdowns of wide receivers. That's in the top 5. It's actually tied for the 3rd most in football. And just to go back to Dallas here, like I get it, CD, unstoppable. But how about Brennan Cooks too?
Mhm.
Like the matchup is still just as nice. They've allowed 3,000 yards to wide receivers, which is the league high, 25 touchdowns at the position, just one behind the Philadelphia Eagles. And these two teams played. I know it was in Dallas, and the Cowboys are averaging like 40 points per game at home, basically over the last 2 years. But he had 72 yards and a touchdown in that game. He's got back-to-back games of the touchdown. Jake and I were talking about him midway through the season on All in Football is just kind of a bust, not doing anything, really not even getting any targets, not getting any catches. But over the past few weeks, has really been involved in the offense. 8 targets against the Lions, 7 touchdowns on the season. So I think he's a guy at $5,200 if you want to spend down. I don't mind that play.
He feels kind of like that Gabe Davis play, and to me at least, like gets in the end zone, you're feeling great about it, and it's looking good. But I'm with you. I think that stands out as like one of the plays on the Dallas side of the ball that probably won't be near as owned. Jefferson in particular, just we've been targeting this Detroit defense with wide receiver ones for weeks, and it's been going extremely well. They just really struggle to defend some of these alphas. So totally with you on that. Anything else at wide receiver that stands out to you guys? We'll talk about a couple more once we get to the PrizePicks section as well.
If you want a deep, just hey, throw him cheap lineup, Darius Slayton. Like I actually, funny enough, I joked with Meanie yesterday on the show, and I was like, a Tyrod Slayton, Wan'Dale Robinson stack, and then I looked at Tyrod's actually more expensive than Nick Mullins. I'm like, never mind. So I was like, but I don't think it's the worst. Like Tyrod will take shots downfield. Of all the 3 quarterbacks, he's the one taking the most shots downfield. And while Slayton's been there as a top 2 wide receiver, they kind of tried Jalen Hyatt for a while and went away from him. It's been Slayton and Wan'Dale Robinson basically since Darren Waller came back. And so if you want the cheaper plays, I actually think both of them are. But if I'm looking for that potential 100 yards, which I want the bonus, the volume would be for Robinson. But I think Slayton's an intriguing flyer out there.
Yeah, we talked about him a little bit last week too. Yeah, which was a really nice kind of cheaper stack on Sunday morning we built on the live stream. So I like it. We're here, so we might as well talk about your guys' PrizePicks. We got 4 here to work through. So Meanie, I'll kick it to you first. We've got Herbert at 56.5 over, and then we also have Mike Evans. I already took this one in the way too early prop, so I'm with you with Evans, 67.5. Both of these look pretty good to me.
Yeah, let's start with Herbert. Just the run that he's gotten over the past couple of weeks. Deontay Foreman was like a personal reason he didn't play in week 16, and then he was just inactive week 17. And Herbert has racked up 38 carries over the last 2 weeks, and he's had 100 yards in each of those games. And this spot against Green Bay is pretty good. Like the Packers are inside the top 10 in fantasy points allowed to the position, yards, rushing yards allowed top 5, and yards per carry allowed. So I know that Justin Fields, like there's some. You're like, oh, Fields going to run it all the time, and they're going to give Herbert a little bit of run. But what we've seen over the past couple of weeks is this Bears team is actually playing pretty good, man. Like defensively, they're playing good. They're getting stops. They're stopping the run. They're getting some sacks. They had 4 picks in the last game. They've had, I think 3 of the last 4 games have had at least 2 picks. So I think that they're going to stay competitive. They could beat Green Bay in this game, which will allow them to maybe run the football a little bit more. So that's the over 56.5. I would take anything, like even if that got up to 62.5, 63. I think he kind of lives in the 70s. This is a really good spot. You can run on Green Bay all year long. And then just what we talked about with Mike Evans. I mean, Mike Evans and Baker Mayfield, my goodness, this guy has had just a phenomenal season and a great run. And Mike Evans, I never would have imagined that, he's been a walking 1,000-yard wide receiver and double-digit touchdowns over the course of his career, but he's having a better year this year than he did with Tom Brady last year.
Yep.
Big play guy. Saw what he did to Carolina last year, all of his fantasy points basically in one game. But it has been a pretty good pass defense. I'm with you. When you look at the overall numbers, they're there with Cleveland and Baltimore in terms of yards allowed and passing yards allowed, and teams are running on them, and Rachaad White's going to get some work. But it just takes a couple catches, Holka. right? A couple grabs, a couple deep shots to Evans. And
the part about the matchup that I really like, Meanie, is Carolina plays more cover 3 than any team in the NFL. Evans 5th in the NFL with 528 receiving yards against that type of defense. Shout out Rich Rebar for that one. So I do like kind of looking at some of those splits. In particular, 67.5 just feels way too low for me. Both of you guys seem to like the Herbert over. Jake, I see you
I gave another one.
I see you frantically changing your PrizePicks stuff. So walk me through Reed 50.5 and then also 62.5 for your boy KW3.
Yeah, well, I realized that I had the PrizePicks from last week in there, so I was changing them on the fly, and then
there we go.
Didn't even notice Meanie is at Herbert 56.5. I love the over on that too. The stat that I was ready with when somebody else was tweeting about him earlier this week. Meanie knows this. I bring it up all the time. Since his career, 10 plus carries, 50 plus yards every single time. It's happened 15 times where he's had 10 plus carries. 7 of those have gone for 97 plus yards. Like, this is as long as Deonta Foreman stays out, like that could change everything, and we don't know what's going on with the situation, but he was apparently a healthy scratch last week. So I love the Herbert, and that was one of the ones I put in, and then I was like, oh wait, Meanie's talking about Herbert right now, so let me swap him back out. Yep. The Kenneth Walker 62.5 feels like an easy smash in this opportunity. I was a little bit concerned heading into the 4 p.m. games last week because, for fantasy purposes, I'm like, we need to wait and see. But for DFS, and if anybody would have asked at that point, he would have been an RB1, top 10, top 12 play. Just need to know he's 100% healthy. Sounds like, he's working through it. It's just this time of year. But going against Arizona with the volume he's been getting, I mean, we were worried about Charbonnet earlier this year. He's not even a factor really at this point. So 62.5 against the Cardinals is like, you might have that by the third quarter. And then I go back to Jaden Reed. I pulled him up when I saw that he had Herbert. I was like, let me go check on my boy Jaden Reed. 50.5. And that's like the last 2 games he's hit that. And again, I keep going back to, I know the Bears are a little bit worrisome. But if you look at it, the volume, at least in the targets and receptions, usually is there. The problem is sometimes he's actually got like 6 for 35, and that's a little bit of a concern. But more often than not, this is kind of something that, I bring up with you a lot of times. We go back to the Zach Moss a few weeks ago. If you told me right now today, you and Meanie said, I'm guaranteeing Jaden Reed gets 5 catches this week, I would take this 50 and I would put serious money on it. Like, the times that you're really going to catch 5 or 6 passes and not hit the 50-yard mark are super rare. So I think 50.5 against again, I keep going back to, I want teams that have something on the line to play for. I'm going with this opportunity here. 50 feels low.
Like it. That's 2 of the ones that I was on and considering for the way too early drop yesterday. A couple of those other ones, if you're watching right now, CJ Stroud, I took an over 257.5, pairing that with
I almost said Stroud.
Yep. So I like the Houston guys a lot. Very similar types of splits that we're talking about with Evans. Outside of Carolina, no one plays more cover 3 than the Colts. So really good splits there for both Stroud and Nico Collins. They also can't pressure at all, which has been great for CJ Stroud, second in the league this year against teams from a yards per attempt perspective when they aren't pressuring him. So really like both of those as well. If you want these, make sure you guys grab or jump onto the newsletter, PropDrop. There is a link in the description for that. Also, if you want to take any of these, you can always use code HOLKA. PrizePicks will give you up to $100 to play this with. All right, let's circle back, fellas, to the running position. There's a couple guys that are a little bit kind of in the mid-range, which is nice because we'll be able to get up to some of these more expensive wide receivers if we want to. Jake, I'll kick it to you. Zamir White, 6K. I have a little bit of a bias here because he's one of the only touchdown props I haven't hit over the last couple weeks. He did have some opportunities close to the goal line, didn't quite get in, so this guy's hard for me to click, but it still makes sense, the volume, all the stuff. 6K is great.
Yeah, the volume is really what it is. It's worst case scenario, you get what you get last week, and at 6K, that's still a value. It's not the biggest hit, it's not the biggest value in the world, but if you're playing cash, it's a solid hit. Going against Denver, that's been the one area. They have been better as of late, but if you look at this run for the past 3 games, and you said he's only had the touchdown in the first one, but 17.5, 17.5, 15.6. I mean, right there, you're already talking about 2.5 times you're buying there. So I'm looking at Zamir White as a lock to play it safe. I'd probably actually, because of that, because the ceiling feels limited, I would probably stay away from it in tournaments for what you just said, because I don't think you're getting the 25-point game from it. It's going to involve 2 touchdowns, and even at 2 touchdowns, it might be like the Derrick Henry type of game. So I love Zamir White. And then I'm going back to Kenneth Walker if I'm paying up, and my boy Rashad White. Those are my two pay ups, and they're not even that big of a pay up, 65 and 6,700. Rashad White, something to play for. The Buccaneers, something to play for. And Rashad White's been one of our boys for most of the year, top 3 running back, top 4 running back. And Kenneth Walker, I just brought him up before at 65, which is surprising that he's even cheaper than Rashad White. I figured they'd almost be there. Oh, no, Rashad's at 76. I was thinking he was 66. Yes, that's actually a bigger pay up than I originally had written down, at least on my paper down here. But even so, 76, if you're going to pay all the way up for that, Walker at 65 is probably my lock of all running back locks at 6,500.
Yeah, 6,500. Wouldn't it be just like poetic justice if Tony Pollard just ruined this for everyone this week? Has like 150 yards and 3 touchdowns, and we've just been everyone's just been waiting for that one. But I'm with you. I think I prefer. He is due. Yeah, it just be all the people that have their Week 18 fantasy championships would be happy for sure. But I'll give an honorable mention.
Not for me.
Yeah, not for me either. Jordan Mason, 4,600, San Francisco against LA. I think he's
I was just about to bring him up
chalky. Too. Yeah, I think he'll be chalky, but that's a way to get into some of these other wide receivers. Pierre Strong, I think, is pretty strong as well at 4K against Cincinnati. So I think those guys, if you wanted to even pay down a little bit further, make a ton of sense. Meanie, you had a couple guys here. We talked about Herbert, but also Saquon is someone that we haven't gone to in a few weeks now. So curious your take on him.
Yeah, I mean, Jake should know this. I'm surprised he doesn't like Saquon. I just been picking on his own defense for weeks.
Yeah.
For weeks. I mean, I see it firsthand. From week 1 to week 9, they allowed 60 rushing yards per game. It was the top run defense in all football. After the bye, week 11, they've allowed 150 rushing yards per game, which is the second most, just behind Seattle. I'm going to get to James Conner a little bit because I like him too.
Mm-hmm.
But Saquon, and it's unfortunately the Eagles games they've been primetime games, so really haven't been able to take advantage of it from a DFS standpoint. Nobody liked Kenneth Walker when they played. It was a Monday Night Football game. I loved Walker in that game. His rushing prop was like 50. He got up to 80 rushing yards. And from an efficiency standpoint, it was his best game of his career. And then Saquon had 80 rushing yards and a bunch of run. This team can't tackle. They can't stop the run. James Conner, like it was every single play. They were just starting off running. And the Eagles had no answer for it. And they were getting 4 or 5 yards on every play. Michael Carter had his best game as a Cardinal. Like, remember that guy? Like, he was running all over the defense as well. So I like Saquon here. I think it's going to be a game where he racks up another 18 plus carries, 23 for 80. I know it's not super efficient, but all the run that he had a touchdown. I know that Tyrod likes to run as well, but I think Saquon at 69, you don't want to spend up for Taylor and the stack there with Slayton. I think he's a good play. And then I'll just go back to James Conner at the same price basically as White, $100 more at $6,100. This guy's got 6 touchdowns over his last 4 games. And it's just nobody ever wants to draft him. Nobody ever wants to play him. It doesn't seem like he's on the bad football team. Are they going to be able to move the ball? But I mentioned Seattle and Philly. Like they're the worst rush defense in football since week 11. He's catching balls out of the backfield, 5 for 67 in week 16. He's got back-to-back games with the receiving touchdown, and he's scored at least a touchdown, whether it's through the air or on the ground, in 4 straight games. So he's getting a lot of touches at the moment. So those are the 2 running backs that I like. I mean, I love Rashad White too, and this is a really good spot for him to spend up. I think it's he did leave the game a little bit with an injury last week, but I think he's good to go. I think a lot of Tampa guys are banged up right now, but it's as Jake said, it's a must-win situation. But yeah, Connor and Saquon, I think I was also going to bring up Pierre Strong, so I'm glad you did. It's like, am I going to get too crazy with Pierre Strong? But it really is about opportunity, and I don't think Ford's going to touch the field, and Hunt probably won't too much either.
Yeah, we've been calling Rashad White our little Leonard Fournette play, and I know I used to always bring up Leonard Fournette on the show with you guys for the footballers back when he was playing for the Jaguars. It's the same kind of thing, what you're going to get from an efficiency standpoint, but you are going to get that volume, you're going to get that passing game work, you're going to get all the high equity touches around the goal line. So I like that. Yeah, people, I guess, still think of Philly as like a pass funnel defense. It's really not the case. Their defense is just horrendous against the run also. So love the Saquon call. I don't think a lot of people are going to go that direction. Looks like he's projecting for still sub 10% ownership. So really like Saquon too. That's a great call.
I think you got one more too down in this, if you're one of the cheap range, assuming Kamara is out. The Saints still can back their way into a playoff spot too. And Jamal Williams back when when Kamara was out earlier this year, we're talking about like 90% of the touches. Back was like week 1. And granted, I don't think his ceiling is a 20-point ceiling, but I think he's in play at what he's at 5,200. I think you could look at Jamal Williams too.
Okay.
23 opportunities last week, 0 rushing touchdowns after leading the NFL in rushing touchdowns last year.
Still has 0. He's really going to finish the season with 0?
He might. He led the NFL in touchdowns and red zone rushing touchdowns last year, but
that's crazy,
I guess.
Jeez. That Saints team has been, or at least last week, I didn't expect to see Juwan Johnson go completely nuclear. I had some overs on Olave and Shaheed, which wasn't great. But Jake, Juwan's on your list at 3,600. Let's talk about some of these cheaper tight ends. I do think obviously McBride is in play, but the context of this slate, it's really tough to get there and get some of these other guys we want in the wide receivers and quarterbacks.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing. There's 2, and I think they're both pay downs this week. Is Tucker Kraft, assuming Luke Musgrave doesn't return. Apparently, I'm going to be Packers heavy this week. But Juwan Johnson, this is something we were looking at earlier this year, and Taysom Hill threw a giant wrench into this plan. But now that Taysom Hill's kind of been phased out-ish again, Juwan Johnson just continues to smash. I'm with you. Like I had his over last week, and I had him and I still didn't expect that. I still don't expect him to go off like that. But against Atlanta, a little bit more concerning, and a little bit more people are going to be paying attention to Juwan Johnson at this point. But DraftKings really hasn't moved this price enough for what he's been able to do. Even earlier this year, before the Taysom Hill nonsense started, he was somebody we talked about a couple times as because of the price as a top 5, top 6 play. So I think at 3,600, if you're looking to save, like you said, you knew I was going to bring up Trey McBride if I could. He's our Christian McCaffrey this year. You have permission to play Trey McBride until now because he's finally over 6,000, and he's now they kind of made it cost prohibitive. So if you're looking at the ones that are available and not super expensive, it's Kraft and Johnson for me this week.
Yeah, before we get to yours, Meanie, I think the difference with McBride this week is because we actually have a couple guys that are like min price that are in play. I still think that Noah Gray, I know that we're not going to get the starters for KC, but 2,500 against this Chargers team, I think he's in play. I think that you could even talk yourself into a Harrison Bryant against a Cincy defense at 2,500. So like this is a week where I want that salary to pay for some certainty from a volume perspective at both running back and wide receiver. And then we have a couple of these quarterbacks. I'm just not going to mess around, I don't think, with an expensive tight end this week. I agree that some of these guys in like this 3K range are nice, but man, saving an extra 1K to get to some of these other guys at least makes some sense to me. But Chigo Okonkwo, Meanie, this is a guy we talked about a decent amount this year as well. Still 3,600 in the spot against Jacksonville.
Yeah, I would much rather Juwan Johnson. I love the call. And from a touchdown, I mean, we've been 3 straight weeks we've had this on Main Streets. It was plus 680 2 weeks ago. Last week it was, 3 weeks ago it was plus 680, then 6-1. And then even last week was plus 480 for him. I'm looking right now, he's plus 280. So it's still pretty good value. Derek Carr is chucking inside the red zone. It's not so much Taysom Hill carrying the ball, which we've seen in the first part of the season. Carr's playing really good. He's been efficient. Even Jimmy Graham is scoring touchdowns inside the red zone. So it's one of the 2 tight ends, just like kind of like when Darren Waller was healthy with the Raiders, and he was looking at Waller's way quite a bit inside the red zone. But as for Okonkwo, it's a volume play. He's got 10 targets over the past couple weeks, got 9 catches. He did score a touchdown. It's like the ceiling doesn't seem to be high because this offense is just, it's so bad. How many red zone opportunities are they going to get? But the Jags have given up 3 touchdowns to the position over the past couple of weeks. So it's a possibility. And I just love the Gray call. I just feel like, why not spend down? This is a week where we can spend down at the tight end position. Kelsey's not going to touch the field. No, Mahomes is not going to either, but who else is catching passes there? Right? Yeah. Nobody else can catch a pass outside of Rasheed Rice. He's not going to play a whole
potentially
lot,
nobody, because it's Blaine Gabbert.
True.
Well,
true.
2,500. Straight up Gray all the time. Gray, right? Yeah, probably nobody. Everyone's dropping passes in KC, but to spend down, like this is the week, right? To get a little weird, uncomfortable with your lineups, spend down at a tight end position. You're just looking for a tight end that will be involved inside the red zone. He's one of them.
Well, then I know what your answer is. It's the same one I told Pat Mayo last week when he was like, Josh Oliver. And I'm like, no, it's going to be Johnny Munt. Like, just go back to Johnny Munt again.
Sure.
These like tight ends for the Vikings are funny because I go to like every game for the most part, and like some of my buddies will always do some sort of like 6-leg prize picks, and like one of them always wants to pick one of these dusty tight ends for like 6 yards or something like that. So there was one week we had a 5 of 5 going into like I think the third quarter. We were like already halfway there basically. All we needed was an Oliver over 4.5 or something. So it's just like a little dump off to Oliver. He doesn't get there. He gets a goose egg. We get our 2x or whatever. We get out of there. So every time that Oliver catches a ball, I just have like immense tilt at this point because all I needed was one more from him, which was brutal.
I will say this: if you are going to pay up a little bit, I'm going to go back to I will say Hunter Henry for two reasons. Is the Jets are very similar to the Eagles when their defense was playing well. And also the Ravens is when the defense is that strong, especially on the outside, their vulnerabilities usually come from the slot and tight ends. And tight ends haven't gone bananas even before Njoku. Like there have been a lot of good games. Mayer caught a touchdown against them. There's a lot of 50, 60-yard tight end games against them because that's your one area. It's not weak. It's just the weakest of how good they are. I would say with how much Zappe loves throwing to tight ends, his touchdowns have been Hunter Henry and Mike Gesicki when Hunter Henry was out. I think if you're going to slightly pay up 4,100, he's in play as well.
I like it. Let's just touch on defense like really quickly, and then we'll get into building
Browns.
a lineup.
Done. Quickly. Over.
Browns are fine, but like, I mean, I'll say this is one of the weeks where I'm just going to pick a lot of these defenses that are against backup quarterbacks. So I think Chargers, Bengals, Jaguars are the ones that I'm kind of locked in on. But yeah, Browns, if you want to, I mean, 3,200 is great. What do you think, Meanie?
And they're probably sitting Chase and Higgins. That's why. You got
Okay.
Browning throwing to a bunch of backups too now. So that's why I said Brown's done as a joke. I guess you can make the argument.
Yeah, but they're not going to have their starters.
I was just about to say, like, yeah, you're fine. Your counter argument is actually a good one. I'm going to look through the list. I mean, ask me. I'm going to look through the list a little bit more.
Okay. What do you think, Meanie?
Yeah, I think, man, the Raiders have been playing pretty good. It's tough to spend $3,500. You look at the Raiders, it's like, the Raiders, but what, Jake, you're not, I mean, Pierce is these guys playing, right?
Yeah.
Oh, no. I was saying do it. Go back to it. I had them last week
okay.
and they disappointed.
Gotcha.
I would actually take that opportunity because people are pissed off from last week to use them this week because a lot of people were on them last week. And I think this is a good week to go right back to them.
Yeah, I was also on him last week. Minshew's been a turnover machine. I think he had like 9 or 10 picks over his last 9 or 10 games, but it just,
here's the key. Sorry. You were just about to say one sack. So the biggest thing that the Raiders have been doing is getting after the quarterback. Something maybe, and I'm going to even say like we should have looked more into. So the Colts offensive line just did a terrific job in that game. And the Colts offensive line is actually pretty damn good. So I think that's maybe something like the Raiders should be able to get after the quarterback more this week versus what they did last week. And it's really limited Max Crosby being able to get in that backfield.
Yeah, exactly. Like just two defenses that you just wouldn't expect to, people would like the Raiders and the Bears. Like those are two defenses that I think are just playing really good at this moment. And for the Raiders, I mean, what they did to Kansas City with the pick six and the 2 touchdowns, and they did the same thing pretty much to the Chargers the week before that. They've racked up 13 sacks over the last 5 games. And I don't know. I think that Sean Payton is... I don't know, man. Sean Payton, he said that Stidham gave him a better chance to win the football game. Like,
Wild.
What the heck is he thinking? Yeah, I watched that game, and I know it's a money thing, and Russell Wilson, and it's a conversation for another day. But when I watched Stidham in that game against the Chargers, it was just lucky that he was going up against the Chargers,
Right.
and they didn't have any playmakers or anybody to get after the quarterback because he made a lot of bad throws. He took way too long with the ball in his hands in the pocket. So I like this Raiders defense to bounce back in this spot. I actually like them a lot at home, like just from a betting standpoint. I think just the way that they've been playing and the other side of the football, a team that's checked out. And I know we like the Packers, and I'm with you, Jake. I like the Packers and Love and some of these weapons as well. But the Bears at $2,900 is another defense is just making plays. Look at some of these games since week 11: 3 picks, 4 picks, 2, 3, 0 against Arizona, 4 picks. The sacks, they've had at least 2 sacks in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 straight games. They're just playing really good football at the moment, and I think that they're going to show up on defense too.
They're pesky. The Bears are like low-key like not terrible right now, and I think this is their Super Bowl going into Lambeau, trying to be spoiler for that. So I think that makes some sense. Let's go ahead and build a DraftKings lineup, fellas. Normally I let Jake kind of drive the bus here, but I want to try something a little bit different. We're just going to go around the horn here, and we'll each take a guy and kind of build this thing out.
I already built my lineup too as we were talking.
Go ahead and play it, Jake.
I slid the Raiders in there.
Go ahead and play it. But Chris is the guest today, so we're gonna let Chris start this thing off, and we'll give him the first pick.
So we'll start at let's start at running back.
Okay.
Right. Let's put Saquon in our lineups.
Saquon. All right, let's do it. 6,900.
It's an underrated play. It's getting away from a little bit of the chalk. I don't think it's the best play. Like we like White. I like Connor. But I'm going to put Saquon in there as a little underrated play. I think that they're going to run all over Philadelphia again. I know Jake hates it. That's the thing. Let's get uncomfortable with this lineup, guys. Let's start with Saquon.
Pay $300 more and get Breece Hall instead. How about that?
All right. Well, I'm gonna go next after that, Jake, and I'll be the guy that'll take the hit here. Give us a little bit of flexibility from a salary perspective. I'm throwing Noah Gray into this lineup because I don't want any of these tight ends at like the mid 3Ks when we have a Noah Gray at 2,500. Might get 0, but is gonna free up some salary for us, which I think is important this week. Go ahead, Jake.
Whatever.
I know Jake hates it, but that's fine with me.
Well, then fine. I'll screw you guys over too. Like you're gonna have to take my wide receiver because I'm putting Justin Fields at quarterback. So screw you guys. You're stuck with Justin Fields.
Okay, Fields 7,200 is in there.
So we're gonna snake back DJ Moore.
We'll snake it back to you. Yeah. Do you want DJ Moore? Or do you want Reed on the other side?
Both.
You get one.
Well, if I take DJ Moore, you're gonna bring it back with Reed for me anyway. So there you go.
So you're taking DJ Moore. Okay.
Yes.
7K just buries our lineup from a salary perspective. Okay, sounds good. So if we're snaking back, I've already taken a $2,500 player. I really wanted to play Mike Evans on this team, but now I don't know if we can fit him. Since you guys are the guests, I'll be, again, the person that just takes something cheaper that gives us a little bit of room. I'm going to take the Chargers defense at 2,800 for us to give us an idea of where we're at with this lineup. So right now we need running back, 2 wide receivers, and a flex. We have 5,900 the rest of the way, so we're still doing okay.
Wait, how much was your defense?
2,800.
Oh, we can. Do you want the rest of the lineup and how you can do it?
No, I want Mimi to go. I'm trying to give us a different feel here. Over. Yes.
Yeah, I feel like I've really put us in a tough spot with Saquon, but then Jake went with Fields, and we had to put DJ Moore.
Jake ruined it. Yeah.
Yeah, Jake ruined it with the Fields play. I was gonna give a little bit of Brandon Cooks love here, but I don't know if I can do that.
He takes a combined 14.2 in salary with his turn there. I've taken a combined. I've taken a combined. Not even 6K on 2 picks. Oh, yeah. Okay.
Oh my goodness. Let's just bring it back, I suppose, with Reed.
There you go.
Like Reed on the show, just make Jake happy, I suppose. At $5,700, so we'll chuck him in there. And
okay,
I don't know if it's gonna be a high scoring game. I don't know if I love the build of this, but we're rolling with it.
We got Reed in there. I'll throw Jordan Mason in at 4,600. I still think that he could potentially be like the lock of locks this week at that price point. So I like him quite a bit. 6,650 the rest of the way for a wide receiver and a flex. Jake, take one and then give Meanie the last pick. How's that?
For a wide receiver and a flex?
Yeah.
Do I want to take the high one and screw him over, or to take the low one? And
we're fine on salary. You can do whatever you want.
I know, because we can. I'm looking at right now. We can do Slayton and Mike Evans. Just so you know. You get your Mike Evans. Sorry, Meanie. Screw you. Slayton and Mike Evans.
Evans is in there, 5,900 if you take Evans.
Yeah, so there you go.
Is there another guy that you like more than Slayton in that range? Meanie?
Yeah, go give it to Meanie. Put Mike. I took the 3-7K guy, so there you go. Although the Mike Evans one was yours, to be fair.
The Mike Evans one is one that I wanted. Yeah,
I'm with you. I'm with you, though. That's why I said let's get him in there and let Meanie figure it out.
Okay. There's a lot of guys in this range, actually, we talked about.
I know. I love the Mike Evans call. We can't go Khalil Herbert because obviously we have Fields and company, but I mean, that's such a really good price there, $5,700. I probably should have led with him, and then Jake wouldn't have put Fields on us.
You're taking Zeke and all the incentives. You could take Ford at 5,600. There's a few guys here.
Yeah, you know what? Zeke is okay. I just don't feel like the ceiling is super high with him, even though he is getting a lot of the touches.
Yeah, I agree.
I don't know. Man, I got this weird feeling that Brandon Cooks is going to score a touchdown.
I like it.
$5,200. I don't want to leave $700 off the table. That's kind of where I'm at.
Well, if we do Cooks, we could upgrade. We could upgrade something else. We could upgrade tight end to one of the guys you guys like, if you want. So if we do that, that gets us 3,200 at tight end. That gets us to
nobody.
Not the guys we wanted. So never mind.
Not the guys that we wanted.
Yeah. Okay. So screw that idea. Putting Noah back in. I don't mind the Cooks call because I feel like he's still one of those guys. If he gets in the end zone, he's going to meet that salary pretty easily.
Yeah, he'll return value at that price if he does score.
So Addison fits in there?
It's a 50. Yeah, it's a 53.
He fits in.
Yeah, this is a weird build, you guys.
Well, I was going to say, do you want? I'll just give here because I want you to put my lineup in like we normally do. I'll just give you how I made this one work. I have Fields, Walker, Hall, which I love getting Walker and Hall, by the way. DJ Moore, Jaden Reed, Darius Slayton, Juwan Johnson, Jordan Addison, and the Raiders.
The ankle bothers me a little bit with Addison, personally.
Of course, yeah. This is going to be watch up until Saturday.
Yeah. I feel like he was kind of gutting it out a little bit.
I'd rather play Cooks than Addison.
Me too. You've been outvoted, Jake. Okay, so
I was giving you a different lineup. I was just giving this one that we put together that you don't even like.
well, you put it together. I'm not saying I didn't like it.
I don't have Slayton with Saquon as this.
Screw it. Put in Beowulf. I saved it all the way for the end.
Yeah.
Realistically, we could take out Saquon, and we could probably get up to White, right? And then 5200.
I'd actually just, if I'm going that high, I actually like Breece Hall more than White at 72.
Jake is just adamant about Breece Hall, so should we just put Breece Hall in there?
Let's put in Breece Hall for him. He's going to catch 15 passes.
There's plenty of options for the people to tinker with this one. I think you could always take the Chargers D out there and pay up a little bit for something like the Jaguars at 3,200 as well, if you like that a little bit better against Tennessee. But this will work, fellas. Jake Ciely, everyone, you guys know him. At All Kid on Twitter. Chris Meaney at Chris Meaney on Twitter. You guys know him from FTN. Anything else that you guys want to plug? Where can the people find you? Everyone knows Jake, but Meaney, the floor is yours, man. Appreciate you coming. This was fun.
Yeah, I mean, this was a blast. It's been a lot of great memories that I had with both of you guys doing some DFS and building some lineups. Yeah, Chris Meaney, tweeting out the shows, FTN, our YouTube page, Mean Streets, multi-sport show. We have a hockey show with Eric Young twice a week on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Always some massive slates in the NHL, like 13 games on Thursday. So rolling through those with a couple PrizePicks plays, a few props. And then Jake and I have this series show with Lauren Carpenter every Saturday from 9 to 11 Eastern on Channel 87 Fantasy Sports Radio. So we'll try to dive into what will be a wacky week 18 with hopefully a little bit more news on which players will sit and which players will start. But yeah, appreciate it, Holka. Thank you so much, man. This is a blast.